實際上由2011年311事件之後咧，好幾個嘅呢一啲嘅核能專家咧，都仍然強調而家輻射個嚴重性咧係與日俱增嘅嚇。其中一個測試嘅專家直情佢做嘅工作，佢本身過去幾十年做嘅工作就係咩咧？就係去到全美國嗰啲核電廠嘅隔離，方圓10英里之內所住嘅居民，明明核電廠話嗱聽唔到輻射，全部安全啊，輻射嘅指標安全嘅情況底下咧，佢發覺咧方圓10英里居住嘅所有居民，佢哋差唔多逢係女性都患乳癌，你知唔知啦？安全嘅噃，聽唔到輻射嘅喎 ，OK， 咁所以你值得聽專家講好過自己胡思亂想啦，係咪
？2011年嘅福島核泄事件，至今已經差唔多3年啦。人就好似埋首喺泥土下面嘅鴕鳥，早已經忘記呢個事故，繼續開心前往日本。日本旅行團嘅銷情上升，而兌換日元嘅找換店更加大排長隊。但係事實上，311核泄發生之後，破爛嘅核電廠係搖搖欲墜。東電不斷隱瞞事件嘅嚴重性，宣稱情況已經受控，並且對於種種指控亦一一嘅否認。但係另一方面，日本首相卻係聲稱日本無法控制核泄，並且泄漏輻射水嘅濃度喺近幾個月屢創新高。
There's a worrying spike in a radiation at the Fukushima nuclear plant. Readings from a water storage tank have rocketed 6,500 times higher in 2 days. A powerful typhoon swept through Japan earlier this week, causing toxic water to be released into a drainage ditch leading to the Pacific Ocean. It's compounded what's been a worsening situation at the plant in recent months, as Irina Galushko explains.
2.5 years to admit the painful truth. Japan needs help.
We are wide open to receive the most advanced knowledge from overseas to contain the problem. My country needs your knowledge and expertise.
The past few months have been marked by growing problems at Fukushima. Several workers have been exposed to radiation, the levels of which are reportedly at their highest since the accident in 2011. And on top of that, there's the issue of leakage.
This is the reactor. Inside it is the reactor core, the actual nuclear part of the plant. This is water which is used to cool the nuclear core so it doesn't burst in flames. That water obviously has to go somewhere, so it goes into a special container which is slightly below the reactor itself, where irradiated water is stored and then filtered. Unfortunately, at the Fukushima plant, the situation is such that this container with the irradiated water is located on the very seashore. This is the ocean. And the problem with the Fukushima is that there's a leak, supposedly, right here. So from there, the irradiated water is flowing into the Pacific Ocean.
原因自311事件之後，東電不斷向破爛嘅核電廠射水降溫，因此喺廠房四周建造水缸，存放流出嚟嘅輻射水。但係福島不斷遭強風吹襲，加上地震。就算破爛嘅廠房冇倒塌，周圍嘅水缸亦出現滲漏，造成大量輻射進入地下水同太平洋。即使唔計算輻射物質由破爛嘅廠房飄散出去，亦唔難理解，當大量輻射水流入太平洋，海產自然會受到污染。因此，曾經被提名競逐諾貝爾和平獎嘅澳洲籍醫生 Helen Mary Caldicott 指出，已經唔可以食用日本食物，並且海產亦已經充滿輻射。
And the Japanese knew where the radiation was going because they had a system called SPEEDY that was measuring radiation, and the Americans were flying airplanes measuring the gamma radiation, and they knew where it was going, but they didn't tell the people because they didn't want to create panic. So the people, thousands of them, tens of thousands, fled into the path of the highest radiation level. Now that's criminal. Those people should be put into jail. And then what happened? Then at the same time, huge amounts of water were being emptied into the Pacific Ocean. Every day since that accident 2.5 years ago, 400 tons of highly radioactive water are being released into the Pacific Ocean. But the radiation is getting stronger because they built the 6 reactors on an earthquake fault or nearby on an old riverbed. And the water and the mountains are just behind Fukushima, so the water comes flowing down from the mountains under the reactors. Well, when the reactors were in one piece, they could use pumps to pump out that underground water. But now, the water is pouring down from the mountains and mixing with the molten cores. The cores are called corium, and becoming extremely radioactive. They're pumping out about 300 tonnes of radioactive water a day, and there's a whole series of huge tanks, 3 stories high, 1,060, each containing, I can't remember how, I think there are 360,000 tonnes of radioactive water that are being pumped into these tanks. The tanks are made only to last 5 years. They've got rubber seals, they've got corroded joints, they're leaking. The workers, they had only 2 workers who would monitor these tanks and walk around every day with a Geiger counter. And, you know, now, as the water leaks, the areas are becoming extremely radioactive. The workers are being very exposed. They're running out of workers. They're bringing in workers, people from who are mentally retarded, from mental hospitals and homeless from the streets of Tokyo. And the subcontractors for TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, are the Yakuza, who are the Japanese mafia. And apparently for many years, the nuclear industry in Japan has used Yakuza to supply the workers. The workers are getting really high doses of radiation, and they're really worried they're going to run out of workers. As well as filling up these, and they've got nowhere else really to place any more tanks. But guess what, as my 4-year-old grandson would say, guess what, Grandma? This is going to go on for the next 50 years. And if there's another earthquake greater than 7 on the Richter scale, these tanks are going to collapse. And what will happen to the water? They're just adjacent to the Pacific. Now, you're lucky you live on the Atlantic. I live on the Pacific. And there's a plume of radiation going across directly from Fukushima to the west coast, and I can't remember the name of the current. And it's very radioactive, and the plume of high radiation will reach the northern part of the west coast early next year, and California later in the year in 2014. They're catching tuna off the coast of California now that contains cesium from Fukushima. Because although the Pacific is a huge body of water and the isotopes get diluted, the solution to pollution by dilution is fallacious when it comes to radiation, because the radioactive isotopes reconcentrate by orders of magnitude at each step of the food chain. Algae, thousands of times. Then the crustaceans eat the algae hundreds more times. Then the little fish eat the crustaceans, then the big fish. And we stand at the apex of the food chain. So the food is most concentrated and the isotopes are most concentrated in our bodies. You can't taste, smell or see radioactive materials in the food you're eating. Don't buy any food from Japan. Much of the rice is radioactive. They're encouraging the Fukushima farmers to go back and farm on their land, which is extremely radioactive. The leafy vegetables are radioactive. Tea grown to the south of Tokyo, green tea, is full of radiation. And they're feeding radioactive food to kindergarten children. I held a conference in the New York Academy of Medicine in March called The Medical and Ecological Consequences of Fukushima, with the best scientists in the world and the latest data from oceanographers who are measuring the Pacific and measuring the fish and the whole thing. And you can download it from my website, HelenCaldicottFoundation.org. I'll write it on the thing soon. And it's going to be published in a book called Crisis Without End by the New Press shortly. And it's got all the latest data about Fukushima, the animals, the birds, the humans, the oceans, the pollution, the predictions of cancer. If 1 million people have already died or more from Chernobyl 28 years previously, and 40% of the European landmass is going to be radioactive for the next 300 to 1,000 years. So people are going to be, I don't eat any European food because I don't know what's radioactive and what's not. Don't ever eat any Japanese food again. No miso, no seaweed, no fish, no nothing. They want to export their radioactive